Morning all, how we doing? It's me, Gary, back out on a dog walk. Been on a dog walk for about 20 minutes this morning. And in those 20 minutes, Lincoln City have added yet another new face in the form of trialist A, the mystery Ramirez, Remy Badmanting Howarth. Remy Howarth signed for City. We've all seen him in action, those of us that have been watching the pre-season friendlies. A little bit of background on Remy in case you missed the article that I did on him last week. He started out at Blackburn Rovers as a youngster, played Premier League 2 football for them, which is kind of the under 23 level of football. And there's some championship clubs playing in the Premier League 2 at under 23 level. So he played at that level. He had a couple of loan spells, went out to Bamber Bridge, Skelmersdale, and then eventually wound up permanently at Ashton United. So it seemed that he was on his way down the divisions. Now, for young players, it can be quite tough, I think, to break in England if you're released from a Premier League club or a Championship club at like 18, 19, 20, and then begin to tumble down the divisions. So he took a gamble after Ashton United and moved to, and my pronunciation of this made Ben laugh on the podcast, but Jevin Druids, something like that. So I think he's gone over there. He's gone to the Welsh Premier League. He's done really well. Bagged a couple of goals, I think, on his debut, certainly very early doors. Really impressed. And that's earned him a trial with us this summer. Now, we've seen him in action. Michael Appleton, in his press release this morning, has said that seeing him in action is like watching a kid in a candy shop. Seeing him around the club is like seeing a kid in a candy shop. That's how excited he is to pick up a professional deal. So this is a hungry young player. He can play, as far as I am aware, pretty much anywhere across the attack. So he's left and right. We've seen him play in both of those positions. I think he can play centrally. He had a short spell there against Salford, I believe. Certainly looks really, really direct against Scunthorpe United. Looks like he likes to get on the ball, run at players, which we need in those forward areas almost certainly. So I think it's a decent signing. Obviously, we've done a podcast last night to come out at 12, and in the interim period, we've signed a player. So I don't want to talk too much about the sorts of things that we're going to discuss on the podcast. But, I've talked about trialists signing, and you look at Juan Luque a couple of years ago, and Alex Bradley. I think with Juan Luque, it's probably more parallels to be drawn, coming not from the senior game in England, but obviously he was at non-league scene and he'd come over from Spain. But Remy has been to Wales and played non-league, so it's a similar sort of path. I think they have that same excitement about the game as well. Juan Luque always looked like a kind of an excited kid, and when he got on the ball, he wanted to make things happen. He wanted to press things and push things. I suppose like when you get a new kid in a school team, he wants to show off what he can do. And I think with Remy Howarth, we saw that in the pre-season friendlies, that here's the new boy trying to earn himself a deal. He wanted to show what he could do. So in one of my match reports, I said he was the player that looked like he was playing a competitive game, whereas the others were, playing the friendly game. So a 1-year deal. So it's a roll of the dice. We've got a hand laid out in front of us now. We're going to see what the cards are like, see how he does. I don't think that he's going to be an instant first team player. I think that he's likely to be somebody that we see play in some of the cup games, the EFL trophy games. But you never know. It's easy to say who we think will and won't start, but that completely changes when performances start getting put in. So we might say at the moment, we're going to start with Tom Hopper up front, but if Tom has a goal drought and Remy comes in and scores 3 and 4, who's going to be first choice then? So I think football's really fluid, moves really quickly, as I can tell. Ash has just commented here. That's my boss, Ash Badmanting. I was literally doing work for him about 25 minutes ago, and now here he is watching me do a broadcast. Amusing. I think it's an exciting signing in terms of prospect. I think it's a squad signing. I think we're in a position where it's important that we pepper the squad with squad players. So it's important that every signing isn't an instant first teamer. You need sometimes to have those speculative punts in the side. I spoke about it when we were linked with the Scottish striker. Kevin O'Hara, that it's important to have players who might do well, who you can bring on, who have got potential, who may develop. So it's. I'm sorry, I'm just looking for my dog, who's as far back as you can possibly see. So it's an interesting signing. I think the timing is interesting. Let's face it, we're all expecting a bit more news later on today. And so when a signing is released at 10 in the morning, it suggests that, the hot times of sort of 5 o'clock or 3 o'clock are being taken up by something else. Clive Nate said yesterday on Facebook or Twitter, I'm not sure which one, that it was highly likely that we would have 2 new faces, potentially 3. My gut feeling was that the potentially 3 was Howarth, and the 2 were Alex Palmer and Callum Morton. You would almost certainly expect us to pen a deal with a goalkeeper today. And, Morton has looked almost certain, unless there are any last minute hitches. When you talk to people at the club, they're always keen to stress that, transfers are so fluid and things move so quickly that you can have a player in a bag 1 minute and then the next minute they're somewhere else. And we saw it happen with Ollie Hawkins, I think, was so close to signing for us when he left Dagenham. And instead of getting on a train to Lincoln, he got on a train to Portsmouth and signed for them. Sim Akinola, which was 3 years ago now, I believe, not just close to signing to us. I mean, he was here, he was round the ground, quite rightly refusing to pose for photos in a Lincoln shirt until his deal was ratified. Wasn't ratified, he's gone back and done well at Barnet. So it's all right, people saying, and I'm not picking on him, but Rob Beasley, for instance, saying yesterday he's bored with the transfer saga and it was meant to have been done ages ago. No, it was being talked about ages ago. Nothing's meant to be done at any one time. And some transfer rumours can go on for months and months before anything happens. Tom Nichols, for instance, linked with Cheltenham in early June. He's been on trial at a couple of clubs since and is now interested in Cheltenham once again. So these things flow. And nothing's certain. And until we see a ticker at the bottom here that says Callum Morton signs 1 year loan deal or Alex Palmer signs 1 year loan deal, all we have is rumour. We don't have any fact. So let's go through a couple of the comments that we have. I'll go all the way back to the beginning. Dave Johnson, we can get him up on the screen. Badman Ting is the best way to start a live stream. Thank you, Dave. He's coming at you live and direct all the way from the USA. I actually toyed with starting with Wagwan, but again, I wasn't sure whether that was a fitting start or not. Dave Martin, morning, Gary. Morning, Dave. Hope you're well, mate. From what I've seen, very committed and definitely a team player. Yeah, certainly. I think he's lost my dog. I think he's somebody who, he's going to give it his all because he's been handed another chance in the English game, and I think that's important. Hunger is important in young players. And I think potentially you sometimes see players come down from a higher level who don't have that hunger because they have entitlement. I think you look at players like Ben Woodburn, who went to Sheffield United when they were in the Championship. You look at J. Emmanuel Thomas, who dropped through the leagues like a stone in the ocean. I think those were players that felt perhaps they were playing below themselves. I mean, that might be wrong, but I think when you get somebody like Remy Howarth, he's not. He's excited. He's going to give it his all. He's going to be, it's going to be interesting to see how he does. Our good friend Cornell, who spawned the Badman Ting phenomenon. Do you see Remy Howarth starting tomorrow or next week against Oxford? Potentially tomorrow, you don't know, if pending international clearance. More likely, I think, that we see him from the bench. We've got great competition for places in those wide areas now with George Grant or Jorge Grant, with Harry Anderson, with Theo Archibald, with Zach El-Brazedi. I mean, when you look at what we have that we can play out wide, there's 5 players I've reeled off who, all potentially could play first team football for us. Rob Haddon, good morning. Good morning to you, my friend. Tom Palmer, good morning to you as well. Stuart Wells, if Morton loan deal fell through, who else would you like to see coming up top? Hard to say, Stu, to be honest, mate, because it's all about who's available. It does surprise me that we haven't explored the Arsenal angle with a loan deal this summer. So I think if Morton fell through, perhaps somebody from Arsenal. I think some of the Premier League players that have gone out on loan already are probably those that we're not going to be involved in under 23 football, or those who were not quite as coveted. And I don't want to be harsh to the likes of Trey Coyle at Gillingham. If your Premier League team is loaning you out so early in the window, it's like, just you go get senior experience. Whereas if it's somebody like Tyrese John-Jules, been involved in their first team friendlies, or certainly will be involved in their first team friendlies. I think he was involved in the Charity Shield, I might be wrong. He's a player that if he were to go out on loan, it's going to happen a lot later in the window. So I talk on the podcast about potential signings after this and how, you never know when your money's spent. There's a great analogy for Ben around the TV, which is well worth a listen to, I hope. So, it's up in the air. I don't know. I'm hoping Morton won't fall through. Let's say that. Sam White, evening, Gary. There's a different time zone altogether. Sam is currently looking forward to the onset of summer, while we're looking forward to the onset of winter. Evening, Sam. Dave, again, to me, looks like the perfect sub. I think it'll be a good change of pace at the end of games after Anderson and Elbouzedi rub their legs off. Yeah, Dave, not so sure. I think you're quite right. I think any of those players will be a good substitute at the end of the game. And I think that's what the squad's beginning to look like it's got now, is a little bit of depth. Depth is hugely important. We're going into a season with injuries already in place, and wide players are likely to pick them up. I think, when you're running at speed and kind of twisting and turning, there's all sorts of injuries you can pick up. You tend to get harder tackles, perhaps, when you're trying to fly past a player than you might do in the middle of the park. I don't know. It's just, it helps to have depth, and all of our players the wide players look like they've got an attacking intent. I think Elbouzedi is one that I'm really excited to see this season, because he's looked good in pre-season. He looks like he's bulked up a little bit, and he was a bit flat when he came last year. But I've always said it's hard if you sign for a club in January, because it can take time to settle. That may also kind of be the case earlier in the season. For instance, Howarth now, but bear in mind he's been around the club 4 or 5 weeks, so it's not like he's coming into a team that are already firing on all cylinders. So it's easier perhaps to settle in the summer than it is in January. Which is why I think some of the players that people are claiming we're unfamiliar with, the likes of Elbouzedi and Eden and not Max Melbourne, sorry, but those sorts of players, Anthony Scully, only had a handful of games. They're as new really to us as Rami Howarth is. So there we go. Quick look through the comments. Morning from Adam Barlow. Hope you're well. Cornell has corrected me. He was on the bench for the Community Shield. That's Tyrese John Jules, not Ramirez Howarth. And one more from Cornell, because he's such a prominent commenter. Elbouzedi has been so dangerous this pre-season. He will prove that this coming season. I love Cornell's optimism. And I know sometimes people kind of take the piss a little bit, but that optimism I used to have. Not quite as vocal, but it's, every single season I used to think, this is our season. It was a joke at school. Bear in mind, I went to school in the early 90s, so no season was ever our season until I left. And then we started to pick up under John Beck. And I noticed a few people on Twitter this morning saying, this is the most excited I've been for a season in ages. And I'm excited for the season to start, but I don't get excited about a squad until I've seen us in competitive action, because friendlies mean nothing at all. We look to have done some really solid business. If we go into our first 3 games and we're not creating chances, then all that excitement evaporates. I've been a bit of a pessimist ever since the Magnificent Seven. And for fans of a certain age, Magnificent Seven were 7 players that Peter Jackson signed at the beginning of the 2008-09 season. They basically said, we're going to win as the Champions League, more or less. I mean, it was, we'd signed all these great players and we were going to smash it. And we went to Rotherham, who were promotion hopefuls, and they beat us on the opening day. And after that, it was, it's just a minor slip up. But slowly but surely, the Magnificent Seven were just basically a collection of duds, more or less. 1 or 2 of them didn't do too badly. I think Aaron Brown was all right. Kevin Gall didn't score for us and left. David Graham was a huge flop. So yeah, they weren't magnificent. I bought into the rhetoric. Michael doesn't sell us rhetoric at the moment. He doesn't try and sell us a dream at the moment. He's just assembling a squad, training and making no bold promises. So, this excitement isn't being generated by the manager now. In 08, 09 or 07, 08 or whenever it was, there wasn't an awful lot of social media to kind of generate the excitement around the Magnificent Seven. So Peter Jackson did it himself. There we go. I mean, Adam's with me. Pessimism grows with age. It certainly is in my view. Adam is as long in the tooth as I am when it comes to supporting Lincoln, and he's seen many false dawns, and we've seen some positive dawns as well. So, right, I'm going to have to go because there's a tractor in the field and I've got to put my dog on the lead. But thank you for joining me this morning, and hopefully I'll speak to you from the bar later. Cheers, bye.